I have been talking about starting up a web series for a while now, and I haven't gotten around to it because I am just incurably lazy. But here it is. Welcome to my writer's nest. Um, Here I actually am sitting in my writer's nest. Let me give you a brief tour. This is my baby. This is my typewriter. And the little stamp pad ink. I just had to re-ink the ribbon. You can see my coffee cups and the ream of paper I use. I do have a drink station up here. You will not see that. Um, but this is my writer's nest. This is where I go to write. Obviously, when I'm not writing at work. I do have a day job. I work in retail, and I write quite a lot at work. Um, Always on breaks and lunches. Don't get me wrong. But this is my writer's nest, and I call it a writer's nest because my first novel, Sleepless Murder, was largely it was written before I had any of this, before I had the desk, before the typewriter, before even the chair I'm sitting in. This was all bought later. The first book was written while sitting on a pillow, wrapped in a blanket, on the floor, right right here, next to me, next to where I'm sitting. Um, and it was very much written just on the floor. But I took to calling it a writer's nest, and I liked the name, so here we are, right? Anyway, I am recording this right now at almost 7 o'clock on November 30th. Today is the final day of National Novel Writing Month, NaNoWriMo. Free advertising. And I'm not going to make it this time. This is my third year participating, and I will not be winning this year. This is my first defeat, as it were, and I'm okay with that. I started NaNoWriMo 2 years ago with Sleepless Murder because it was interesting. Like, I had never heard of anything like this. I learned about it from Writer's Digest, the October issue, and like it blew me away, right? Because I had never written anything more than 65,000 words, and even that, in its first draft, was a hair over 23, maybe 27. No, it was 27 because I was going to submit it to Sci-Fi Magazine, Fantasy and Sci-Fi Magazine, and they won't take anything over 25. So it was 27 in its first draft. And I said fuck it and expanded it and got it up to 65 by the start of Nano. And but it just blew me away that there were people out there who were writing so much that they were able to crank out 50,000 words in a month. It took me 3 years of steady work on that manuscript to get it up to 65, where it sits to this day. So that blew me away, right? And I started thinking, I'm like, well, I'm going to do this, right? This was 2 years ago, obviously, and I wanted to do something completely out of left field. I identified myself as a fantasy writer, right? I write in the vein of Tolkien and George R.R. Martin, all those guys, and I'm like, let's do something different, because I had an idea for a book, very Thomas Harris, very Silence of the Lambsy. But I'd never written anything like that. I'd only ever read, even of books like that, Thomas Harris. I'd only read Silence of the Lambs, Hannibal. I've read a couple of Dean Koontz books, but that was about it. And I identified it as a thriller at the time, and it actually has morphed from a thriller more to a police procedural mystery rather than that initial thriller. But when I initially had the idea, it was just a straight thriller. In fact, when I started writing it probably a year before I even heard of NaNoWriMo. It was basically just a straight Silence of the Lambs ripoff, like complete ripoff. But it evolved, right? I had a couple of dreams that helped it evolve, as a matter of fact, and very little of that initial uh, draft. I don't even want to call it a draft. It was like 2 pages before I realized this was a complete Silence of the Lambs ripoff and just, closed the file. But very little remains of that except for victim names. There were a couple of names that were in that original couple of pages that do appear in the finished draft, which I still have not published yet. But I was talking about NaNoWriMo. That first year was fucking amazing. Like, I had never experienced that kind of rush. And that's what it was. It was a full-on rush. Because, like, writing that fast, I'd never written that fast in my life before. I was cranking out 2,000-3,000 words a day. And that's why I finished. I finished like fucking the stroke of midnight on November 24th. About a week after I finished the story, as a matter of fact, I had to go back and re-edit, for lack of a better term, to get me up to the 50K mark. I was only about 10,000 words off, so that was okay. But that first year was amazing, man. If you ever get the chance to just go into NaNoWriMo with a strong idea and an outline and just blaze through it like it owes you money, best high you can ever get. Fucking great. But the second year, I'm like, I'm going to do it again. I expected to, to crank out a book a year, right? What fucking... Like, that's a prolific writer, right? Anybody that can crank out a book a year, anybody that can crank out a book a year is a prolific writer, is considered prolific, right? So I figure, okay, I'll do NaNoWriMo every year, and I'll have a different sequel to this first book. And that worked the first year, last year, my second year. Year number 2, I went in, I had the idea, I knew I wanted to make it a sequel to Sleepless Murder, and I had a sufficiently disturbing dream that helped it along, that actually birthed the entire idea. And I got her done. It took me considerably longer. I think I finished on November 29th last year, just squeaking in right at the end, and I barely did it. So this year, I figured, okay, with this year, I'll go back, because I didn't remember last year's manuscript at all. I remembered bits and pieces of the story, scenes I liked, but I didn't remember, like, the story as a whole. I didn't remember the whole thing. So I figured, okay, I'll go in this year, and I'll just rewrite it from beginning to end, and actually get it up to 50K, and I'll be done with it, right? And nature conspired pretty much to throw a wrench right in the middle of my fucking works right then. About week 2, which is the hardest week of NaNoWriMo, you talk to just about anyone that's participated in it, and they will tell you week 2 is a bitch. Right about week 2, I hit a wall on this one. About the same time that I hit the same wall last year. And I just stared at my word processor screen. I'm like, fuck. I couldn't think of anything else to happen. I didn't want to go back to last year's and just copy paste, because that's cheating to me. So I was like, well, what do I do? Do I continue with this one even though I'm doing nothing but shoveling shit while sitting down? Or do I move on? And I decided ultimately to move on. I moved on to the third story, which I actually just started in October. I started it in October. I'm writing it longhand at the day job. And it's going well. I love this story. I have no idea where it's going or where it will end up, and I love that. I'm so excited about that. But it does seem that this story works better with my pen than the keyboard. Maybe it would work better on the typewriter, but I still have not gotten the alignment right on this one. So this new story, while I love it, I'm not writing fast enough at work, by hand. I write in all caps, and that slows me down. So I'm not writing fast enough to keep up the 1,667 words per day that is required. And I'm okay with that now. To me, NaNoWriMo was always about getting you writing every day. Like I said at the beginning of this video, I am incredibly lazy. I will not deny it. I've been, case in point, have been planning on doing this since January 1st. It is November 30th, and I am just now getting to making a video for my YouTube channel. So, yeah, I am lazy. I make no excuses for that. I'm eminently distractible by Facebook and Twitter and YouTube, and video games and other books that were written by people that have been published. I'm crazy distractible. So it was a struggle to write every day, is what I'm saying. But with NaNoWriMo, that got me. The first year got me writing every day. The second year further cemented that. And by this year, I'm realizing I am not cut out to write that much every day. Okay, outside of Nano, I average about 5 pages a day. 5 pages, TypeScript, double-spaced, manuscript type pages. I always double space. I always, I format it as if I'm going to just finish it and send it to an agent or a publisher. And 1,667 words is a lot, you guys. Seriously, that's about 10 pages in manuscript. That is about double what I average outside of Nano. That's a lot. And the more I thought about it this year, the less I liked it. I love NaNoWriMo, man. It got me to where I am. It got me identifying as the right type of writer. I'm a mystery writer now. That's what I do. I've had more fun writing these mysteries than any of the fantasy stories I've ever written. And I do love the fantasy stories, don't get me wrong. I will eventually publish those stories, that trilogy. But for right now, Caleb Davies, Sheila, Liam, Josh, those are my characters. Those are the ones I want to focus on. Those are the characters that I like. I've come to love them. I know they're all aspects of me. I can point out bits of my personality in each one of them. But that's how I roll now. I guess I'm a mystery novelist, right? So I gotta thank NaNoWriMo for that, and for getting me in the habit of writing every day. I may not get my full 5 pages every day, especially if I'm editing, because that shit is so tedious. I can't add 5 pages a day. So when I'm editing, I usually do 1 or 2 chapters a day, depending on the length of the chapters. I mean, if it's like a 30, 40 page chapter, which isn't unusual in some cases, I'll like break it in half. And even when I'm writing, I do tend to break those big beasts in half. But NaNoWriMo has been very good to me. Baseball has been very, very good to me. No. NaNoWriMo was very good to me, but I don't regret not finishing it this year. And maybe next year, because I just went through a breakup. And, I mean, not just. It was at the end of February, beginning of March. But she did Nano with me last year. And it kind of tore the wound open a little. I'll admit, doing it again this year. So maybe next year I'll be able to go into it with a fresh set of eyes and be able to rock it out like I did the first year. Fingers crossed, but that's really the reason I'm not going to be finishing this year. Partly laziness, partly a bit of writer's block for 3-4 days. I mean, writer's block, it's all psychological, right? But it really can grind you to a screeching halt, and that is something you do not need if you're trying to write 50,000 words in a day. They say any words count. Like, they give you tricks. There's a novel about it. Tricks to write 50,000 words in a day, like write out song lyrics. Those words count. No, that's fucking cheating to me. You know, to me, the 50,000 words have to be original. And by what I mean by original is not song lyrics, not movie quotes, not fucking book quotes, shit like that. No. Throw that shit out and write for yourself. I know that's controversial, but that's the way I feel. But I'll give it another year. I'll give it another shot next year. And if I feel the same way that I felt this year as I did if I feel the same way next year as I did this year, then I'm probably going to call it quits on Nano. I really hope that's not the case, because I do enjoy it. I've contacted, people on the website, in the forums. I've gotten to know a few people, not many, because I'm an introvert. I'm antisocial. Even being in front of the camera for this long is making me nervous and twitchy. But it's a good bunch of people, and I really hope that this feeling goes away, because I do love NaNoWriMo. I do give it credit for making me the writer that I am today. So, anyway, I have no idea how to end this, other than to say, I'm Brett, and this is my Writer's Nest. Thank you for joining me.